for now. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate your time as we kind of round out the first day. We are going to be talking with some of the hottest San Diego tech companies about scaling their SaaS business. My name is Eric Weiss. I'm an executive coach and CEO of Chaos to Clarity. I help tech founders master leadership, scale their business, and secure funding. And I'm here today with, I'm going to pull up my intros here so I don't get it wrong. To my left, Ramsey Priour, CEO of Roomie.ai, the all-in-one meeting platform with the perfect meeting memory. Joe Larsheed, CEO of OnePlan, a strategic portfolio, financial, and resource management solution that fits the needs of every project management office. And last but not least, Cody Barau, founder and CEO of Trust and Will, which gives families a fast, easy, and secure way to create and manage their estate plan online. Right. Thank you all so much for being here today. So before we kind of dive into the question and learn about your journey, quick 30-second elevator pitch. Tell me who your customers are and how you help them. Why don't you start?
Okay, so my company is Roomie. Roomie's customers are anybody who spends a lot of time in meetings. That's probably many of us, if not all of us. And we were built around the premise that if we're going to spend all this time in meetings, we should capture all that information, store it, and make it usable. And LLMs are really good at that, and people are really good at meeting. So that's the two things we're combining.
My product is OnePlan, and OnePlan is a product that helps business leaders align their initiatives, their projects, and their resources and investments to their business outcomes so that they can better make business decisions. And so we also connect to leading work management tools like Smartsheet, Rike, Microsoft Project, and so forth, so that you can consolidate all that data so that business leaders can get that information on where they should be making their investments.
So you can think of Trust and Will like a TurboTax for estate planning, and our target customers are families. It's everybody in this room. If you've got kids, if you're a homeowner, you're a son or a daughter, which I assume all of you are, and you have aging parents around, these are extremely important life documents in terms of who looks after your kids, who can make healthcare decisions on your behalf, all the way down to inheritance, burial, cremation, all the fun stuff. So we're going to talk about death today. That's my business.
Fun topic. Buckle up. So we're gonna take us through the sort of entrepreneurial scaling journey. Now, I would imagine that most of the folks here have not built or not CEOs of a $100 million tech company. Anyone? Any hands? Probably not. So we're gonna kind of rack your brain a little bit and go a little bit earlier in your journey and just talk about sort of how your company have maybe hit some plateaus or hit some ceilings, and then how you've broken through it and scaled to that next phase. So why don't we start with, just discovering that initial opportunity. Where was the there that you discovered that made you decide to do the crazy thing and found a company? Let me start with you.
Okay. So with Roomie actually started 4 years ago as a company called Weight Room, and it was born in the pandemic when people were trying to find ways to interact together. And the idea was this was the video version of Clubhouse, and it seemed to make sense that people, if they want to meet with a lot of other folks, why not video? And what the company learned is that actually video is a little too intimate for some types of conversations, especially one-to-many. But through that, we built a really robust meeting platform, and we started integrating AI into that to organize the chaos of 1,000-person meetings. And I think the aha moment of where is there a need was when actually the founders reached out to me, and we'd worked together in the past, and they were asking me about pain points I had as a sales leader. And I just saw a lot of gaps and a lot of capabilities that if you record every customer conversation, there's so much gold in there. And they had the infrastructure to really extract that and mine it. So that was the problem. And then we spent a lot of time researching, talking with other sales leaders. So it wasn't a survey of one that was deciding what we built, but a survey of many. And things pop up to the top of the list of real pain points. Then the next stage is, will people pay for this? So that was kind of our journey.
Our journey here at OnePlan, well, my journey personally, I've been in the project portfolio management space about 25 years. So I've been really passionate about helping organizations, prioritize their projects and resources. And I had a product previously in 2007 that we built was initially on-prem, but that we moved it to SaaS. So this is back in the old days where we had to move things from on-prem to SaaS. We can talk a little bit about that if anybody's going through that conversion. But essentially, we found a private equity firm that we consolidated 9 other companies, and we went public on NASDAQ. But at the time, we can talk about culture, about scaling. Once we got to that size, the culture just was not the same as it was being kind of a smaller, tight niche type of company. So I decided I wanted to leave, but I saw an opportunity in the market because the market was changing. So back in the old days, people used to do 2 to 3 year program planning, so they'd be able to predict out longer term of what they wanted to invest into. And today we call it the never norm, where there's constant change always going on. Technology with AI coming out, you have the pandemic with COVID, you have economic changes. And so companies need to constantly change on a quarterly basis. And so we saw an opportunity that we could build a solution that allowed organizations to get information in real time, that they can make these key decisions to be able to be competitive. The other problem that we saw that was an aha moment was the proliferation of SaaS, where people are creating all types of work management tools. So you have Asana out there, we talk about Wrike, we talk about Smartsheet. So everybody in the organization was using all different types of tools out there to manage their projects and work. So we said, why don't we consolidate all that information into one portfolio so that the business leader can get that information that they need to make those right decisions. And so that was the aha for us, and that's what we invested into OnePlan and started that up.
So we like to celebrate entrepreneurs of the today version of themselves, not the earliest inception version, which is like filled with stress and anxiety. But the start for Trust and Mill really came out of personal need. I was getting married in late 2017, and I'd never talked to my wife about money and taxes and life insurance and what do you do when you get married. We got newlywed over here, and these are conversations that, like, when do you bring them up? That seems like awkward conversations to have with somebody you're about to marry. But she did lose her dad when we had started dating. And I saw the pain of probate and what it caused for her mom, her stepmom, the brother, and her. And I was like, well, I don't want that for us. So I'm like, well, I'm going to go get this quoted out by a couple attorneys. I can get this done quickly. And I get first quote for $3,000, second quote for $5,000, which I couldn't afford either. And I was like, well, who's doing this online at like a best-in-class level fintech? And like really LegalZoom was the only company, and they're not known for estate planning. They do one of everything of legal docs. And because I didn't see a company that was what I wanted, my co-founders, not my wife, but my co-founders and I started looking into this, and we didn't see anything that was that compelling. We're like, how the hell does this not exist if it's something that applies to every single person that we know? Because just show of hands, how many of you have an estate plan? You have one, you know where it is, about half, almost half the room. That's about statistically how it is for most of the country. So the more people that we talk to in our network, especially for I call us the elder millennials that were like getting married and starting to have families, how few of them had this, like just consistently didn't have this and didn't have that conversation with their aging parents. And that's what inspired us to enter a pitch competition, which we took third place in, got a $5K check, and that really kickstarted the whole company. But for the first year, like all of 2018, we were 5 people in a single office at Downtown Works here in San Diego, just trying to figure out anything that would work. So it was a lot of like Facebook and Instagram testing with different creative and copy. I think we did 17,000 in revenue 2018, but we understood who our high profile customer was. And that's what we raised our seed round on. And then in 2019, when we hit that $1 million run rate in August, I'll never forget it. It was August 2020 or August of 2019, hit $1 million run rate. It was like a fundamental shift on how investors started to look at our business. Even though the unit economics needed a ton of improvement, that's when we were able to raise our Series A, and then the rest has kind of been, hard but easier since then, I guess.
Say it's dirty and scrappy all the way to the top. Doesn't get any easier. So the first kind of ceiling that you hit, obviously you have an idea, you see an opportunity, you start building something, you might get a couple of customers, right? But then there's that sort of first go to market where you're talking to people maybe outside of your network or your inner circle. Mm-hmm. So what were sort of those early hacks or those early go to market tactics that you used? The ones that maybe if there's one that failed spectacularly and then one that actually worked and got you to the next level.
For us, we failed spectacularly, spending a lot of money on Google, spending a lot of money on ad networks. It's just so hard to acquire customers that way in the early days in an effective way. But you feel like you have to at least try. And so we tried. The thing that we learned is we actually were in this process of talking with sales leaders, salespeople. We were doing a ton of interviewing, and we would basically say, will you spend an hour with us? And we would just ask really high-level questions like, what do you hate doing all day? And what takes time that is not valuable? And we did dozens of them. And at the end, we would zoom out, or at the beginning, zoom in at the end and say, okay, specifically, like, how do you capture conversation data? How do you update your CRM? And then we tell them at the end a little bit about us. And at the end, a lot of those people said, can we try it out? And so we said, yes, you can. And we're going to use this as a marketing channel. So we got a ton of great feedback on the product. We still do it as best practice. And so many of those turn into early customers that are genuinely interested. They've kind of heard an infomercial about you for the last 20 minutes. And if they're interested and curious, it's a great way to get some early customers.
I love it. So just to interrupt, I do a lot of work. I call this discovery-led growth. So I love that you're doing that. But basically, if you're out there and you're building a new product, you're obviously having conversations with potential customers. You're designing the solution along with them. That is your first sales pipeline. So is anybody here like actively building a SaaS product that are kind of in that early pre-seed stage? So of all the hands that are up, how many of you are meeting with potential customers and doing interviews and so on like every single week? Okay, awesome. So how many of those people that you're talking to either have committed or, have already become a customer? Okay, so the hands are going down a little bit here, right? But so think of that. Those first people that are willing to give you their time for free are the ones that have the problem, and the ones that care about it the most, they're going to be your early adopters. So keep that pipeline going. So sorry to interrupt, but let's keep going.
Yeah, no, on the same vein, the way we did it, we actually charged customers for the consulting services. So we had created our base platform of what we thought customers would want. And then we'd go out we focused on enterprise customers. So Honeywell was one of our first customers. And we basically came in and said, pay us consulting services to help you implement this, and we'll build this product out more for you. And so they would give us a bunch of money consulting services wise, and we'd start to build out the scheduling engine for them because they had work packages and they're building rockets and things like that with it. And then we go to another customer and they wanted financial management capabilities built into it. They liked the scheduling capabilities, and so then they pay us like $100K in consulting services, but we give them the software for free for the first year. And so we just kept doing that. And so we initially were kind of a consulting business, and we were getting our revenue intake because we bootstrapped this thing ourselves through the consulting services. That was kind of the hack that we did.
So we worked with 2,000 micro influencers, which like influencers gets the eye roll today sometimes, but like 7 years ago, people were like, oh, what's an influencer? And kind of explain it. And when you tried to tell people, what's a micro influencer? That means you're cheap and you don't have a lot of money. So you go people with way less followers, but enough that may get, some new eyeballs on your product. So we had an agency out of Los Angeles that we worked with where we would pay $20 to a family. They would get a free will. And all that we asked in return is that they would take a picture of their estate plan, so these physical documents with like their kids or in front of their house. They had like this super diverse set of creative. And what we would ask them as a question is, well, what does legacy mean to you? So the word legacy in the dictionary, ironically, is the money and property you leave behind in your will. But when you ask that to a person or a family, they have all these different amazing answers filled with emotion and traditions and storytelling and family recipes. So you got all this amazing creative and copy that we got to go A/B test on Facebook and Instagram campaigns. And it really allowed us to hone in on the great lookalike audiences that ultimately started to convert. And that's what helped us build up our narrative. So if we're going to go raise $2 million, which we did, how we're going to spend it, who we're going to target. And we were able to justify that with data, because that's what investors want to see is data to back it up, not just blanket, throwing money into a fire pit of marketing opportunities, which is really easy to do. So that was a fun one that we did. And I look back because we created our whole Instagram feed around that. And there's a lot of feel-good images too. Yeah.
Awesome. So a couple other strategies here. One, so I call this like service to SaaS. So is there anybody here that runs an agency or is in a service business that's interested in building a SaaS platform? Right. So if you are building a tech product, but you have never actually done the thing, you're trying to scale something that hasn't been proven. Right. But if you're providing a service and you're basically building tooling to streamline that service, you can then productize it and you get much higher rate of product market fit. And then what Cody's talking about here is really about honing in your messaging before you go to market, right? So you have your potential customers tell you in their own words what matters to them, and then you're simply amplifying that to the market and say, everybody else who's like these people are going to resonate. So if you have an early go-to-market team, instead of them trying to come up with some fancy creative, just literally take it right out of the mouths of your customers. So obviously proof is in the pudding here. Okay, so let's move on to the next stage. So we've gotten some traction, we've gotten a beachhead here. Now there's that magical pivotal moment of product market fit. Okay, where you feel like you finally landed, you finally gotten a repeatable, successful, go-to-market motion. Now is when things really start to change in the company. You move from sort of exploration, discovery to the first kind of real scale moment. So what was that transition like for you? And maybe, again, I was like the war stories, like what went wrong?
start the other way this time?
Sure. Yeah, Cody, why don't you start?
Yeah, so we've talked about getting to 1 million run rate. So let's talk about next hard phase for us is getting to a 10 million run rate. So going from 83,000 a month to 830,000 a month. And one of the gaps that we had was, well, we're starting to figure out who the high value customer is, but we're starting to tap out, getting diminishing returns on our Facebook and Instagram. So where are some places that we can start testing some bets to drive growth? We're heavy D2C. Just to give context, we are a majority D2C business in terms of our marketing, and now shifted more to B2B2C and SaaS product. But where we started to take some bets was on TV. So TV, when we tell our investors, they're like, hey, TV is really expensive. Neil's back here, one of our investors, but we're telling our investors, hey, TV is really expensive. And you could start doing TV on streaming platforms. So like now as low as like $2,500 a test. We started at 10K a month was like our initial campaign budget. And we went and filmed a commercial that originally they quoted us $250,000 on. We're like, what if we're in it? They're like, we don't recommend that. But we're like, you'll save 70 grand. I'm like, we're in it. So I was in that commercial, which I semi-regret now today because it does perform well. We've put a lot of promoted behind it. But anyways, point being is that TV was a big unlock driver for us. And this is like remnant media buys. So you turn on Fox News or MSNBC or your favorite sports program, you'd probably see our commercial. And we started to see the site traffic go up tremendously. So we were looking at CAC payback period, like how quickly do we recoup that cost of our marketing spend back into our revenue? And it's hard to measure because it's TV, but you'd see these spikes in site traffic every time that a fired commercial goes off. You can use pixel tracking to some extent. And we try to, allocate it or give it credit. And we're able to justify that TV spend. So what TV spend started for us at 10K a month, getting to that 10 million run rate was up to like 200,000 a month, which is crazy to be spending that kind of money. Today, that's small. We spend that in a day or two. But at the time, it was meaningful. So that was a huge kind of change agent for our business being heavy D2C, is getting out of our comfort zone of just social or paid social and going to TV, which for some brands has really paid off. And for us, it did too.
Now, just a quick sidebar. Now, you did a Super Bowl commercial, didn't you?
No, soon. Not yet. Not like next week soon. Not like next week. Maybe next year soon. But that is aspirationally where we had to go. We did a World Series spot this last October, which was pretty cool. Yeah. And we do have Stafford. We have a Super Bowl quarterback in one of our commercials. I'll clarify. So Matthew Stafford of the Rams is in one of our spots. Yeah.
Nice. I don't know how to follow that. Some of our challenges was moving from a service business to a SaaS business, right? And getting everybody in the organizations to start thinking differently around product, annual recurring revenue being the core driver for our revenue, not billable hours. And so that was a big challenge for us to get the entire organization to think differently. The other is, as we were growing, is just trying to find out where to make the investments. So we would initially go into each parts of the business and find out where are we having a lot of issues with overtime and a lot of people working really hard, and we figure out, okay, that's the team we need to build next. And so we just kind of started working around the company and kept building the team there. I don't have any real horror stories for you to share, but not yet.
Sounds like it worked.
Yeah, for us in the early days, it just feels like you're constantly pitching and selling and pushing a rock uphill. And there are these moments where suddenly it gets a little bit easier. And maybe a customer, and this just happened recently, customers started referring us to 5 or 6 people and just copying us on the emails. And then that's when you really feel like, oh, they really do like us enough to endorse us. And those little things, if you can pour fire on them, we're trying to build out referral programs and to really add gas to that fire. But you need those moments. It's so hard, right? The whole journey is hard, but when you see those downhill moments in the ride, it's magical. And so if you can find ways to make it go faster on the downhill, carry you up the next hill.
I use the roller coaster analogy all the time, right? Pre-product market fit is you're just this slow slog up the hill, and then there's this like euphoric moment where everything starts to work, and then the real craziness starts when you hit scale. So we kind of get to that first sort of scaling burst. You've got like one product, you've got one vertical, one market. So then usually when you get to a certain size or scale, you look at expansions, right? Market expansions, region expansions, product line expansions. So what were the expansions that you did in your company, and what really had to change in order to serve, again, additional products and additional markets?
Yeah, my job actually at the company before Roomie was a company called Branch. And at Branch, I was in charge of international expansion. So that was my entire job for 5 years and then 3 years after and as a consultant. International expansion is my favorite topic to talk about, so I won't bore people here. But it's just not the case anymore that you have to start in your home market and wait until you've nailed it to go to the next one. And that usually means going into the UK or Australia and then kind of following this well-trod path around the world. With this approach, we're actually launching right now kind of simultaneous in Australia, in Singapore, and the US. And it's possible to reach those markets. You learn in every one. And you just have to be agile and be listening for, how can this market help me, this other one? Unfortunately, brand recognition and awareness doesn't travel very well, but the learnings, the insights, there are certain markets where you can get incredibly fast feedback in the early stages. That's why we spent time in Singapore. Got the best feedback we could ever get much quicker than we would get here. So I think, thinking strategically about, what's my market eventually and in 2025, what's the best path around the globe?
So why was that? Why Singapore?
Singapore, everybody's back to work. You could probably throw a rock and hit 50 different companies in your ICP, at least for us. And it's very dense and very uber connected. So if you know the sales leaders at 10 companies, you're going to know basically an entire ecosystem. So for us, it was a great way to get to sales teams, success teams. And people are very open to trying out new technology, much more so even than here, certainly more than Europe.
Yeah, it's so one of the obviously the frontiers of AI is around rapid localization. So I think a lot of founders kind of have this old mindset of, you start with the market that right, whether it's local or at least America, but now we can actually test and experiment in multiple languages simultaneously. Obviously, there may be some translation errors, but at least you get some feedback.
Yeah, Singapore was English friendly, and also you have a lot of the big U.S. and multinational brands there too, so you get to see what the local take is as well as the global take in one.
For OnePlan, if you look at our product, it's an enterprise SaaS product initially, right? So we were selling to big companies as a solution to help them manage their initiatives and resources. And so our transition for growth was, how do we get down to the mid-market SMB? How do we make OnePlan more of a freemium type of product, right? How do you get viral like the Reichs and the Sanas of them in the world? And so that's been a big challenge for us in a selling motion as well as a deployment motion to be an enterprise-based type of SaaS product to how do we become more freemium where people just sign up, what call product led, where people just sign up, put a credit card in and just go. And that's been one of our biggest challenges, trying to transition ourselves from those two different markets. And so you also have to know the investment standpoint is if you're going to move into new markets, you have to know you're going to make those investments. You can't spread your wealth around because then you'll start to lose sight on one versus the other. So that's our challenge.
So I'll stick with my revenue bracket. So back to the 1 to 10 million. So one of the areas that we were pitching, I guess, at the Series A was expanding into financial partnerships and financial advisors. Because estate planning touches every aspect of your life, but it generally comes back to finance. And you have such a trusted relationship with your financial advisor. At some point, they're initiating this conversation with you. If they know that you're getting married, if they know that there's liquidity, you're selling your house, you're going through a divorce, could be good or bad. They generally want to push this offering because it just unlocks additional planning conversations. So we brought to market an MVP for a tool for financial advisors to educate their clients on estate planning in early 2020. It was just one person that we hired who came from banking, kind of knew some people here in San Diego. And that business unit today drives north of 10% of revenue for the whole company, in the millions of revenue today, which is amazing. But we had this bet that we wanted to take on revenue expansion, and that was a critique from investors going through the Series A pitch. They're you're just relying on one consumer revenue line item. We want to see more recurring revenue with subscription. We want to see revenue coming from financial advisors or financial institution partnerships like banks and credit unions. So we leaned into that, and we hired 2 people in 2020 and then another guy in 2021 to kind of offset that workload from us, the founders, and bring people in more competent than us. And it paid off because now today, 7 years in on the whole journey, but our business is 40% B2B2C and growing. And that is a function of a decision that we made all the way back in 2019, late 2019. It's hey, we need to expand here.
So were you saying that, this started off as a service business that then...
Direct-to-consumer business, selling to families, direct on the internet, and then expanding into financial advisors. We have over 17,000 financial advisors today that we work with, and over 150 financial institutions.
Okay, so again, I want to hear about what didn't go so well. It's been incredible stories of the journey, the straight line up. So tell me about what broke as you hit these different levels of scale. What was something that either throttled you and really held you back from growing, or literally blew up in your face and you had a crisis on your hands?
Well, from the standpoint from moving from enterprise to SMB, what blew up in our face is we got a huge churn rate from the SMB side because we were used to people paying us to service the software, and when they didn't pay for us for the services, we left them alone and hoped they could figure it out, and they didn't. And so, as we're managing our NRR and our GR, and ARR, and churn, it's that that's and when now we have a private equity firm on our butts because we a year and a half ago brought on a private equity firm. That it doesn't look good in the books, and so that's one of the things that's really burned us on trying to make that move. And that was to the point I was trying to make earlier: is if you're going to try to make a move to a new market, make sure you have enough investment and enough resources to go after it fully and not half baked. And we did it half baked by let's just give this to people and let them try to figure it out, and it's kind of blown up in our face on the number side. So we're trying to make adjustments there.
Yeah, for me, especially as you expanded around the globe, the hard lesson I learned was not having enough redundancy in management and leadership. It's really expensive to hire managers, and you're excited because you can afford a director level person. But then you become so incredibly dependent on them. And if it's a bad hire, or they get run over, or they go somewhere else, you're so tied to that person that you can't be nimble anymore. And so what we learned the hard way is that we usually have to have at least a very senior person that could step in if that person's going to be on vacation for a couple of weeks, or so you have redundancy, so you're not beholden to one person for better or for worse. That was a very hard lesson to learn, but won't do it that way again.
Yeah, I'd say that the people challenges are the hardest. I mean, you have people that in the early days of your startup, you have limited resources. You either have little to no funding or you're bootstrapping. So you get the people that that you can afford, and maybe you give up some equity. And those people can scale quite a bit. And we had most of those people scale with us through the 10 million run rate and beyond. But you have people that are great for that stage of the business that aren't great for the next phase. So going from 10 to 50 million, which we're now at this year, it's a big delta for people that haven't had $50 million company that they've run in operations or product or engineering or in partnership. So we as a company, we had to massively reset our executive team over the last year and a half, which led to us parting ways with some extremely good people, kind people that are personal friends of mine. And to have to fire these people is extremely emotional. You can't ever get over that. That is a forever founder problem that'll always exist. And these are people that were in battle with you when you had no resources, nothing else, just yourselves to depend on. And now that there's this new executive team in place today, it's not that they solve everything, but there's almost like a calm with the storm that is just the chaos of building a company. There's a calm demeanor because they've been there before, they've done it before at this stage. And as a founder, this is the furthest I've made it today, is this Friday. And having the trust in these people, it's extremely reassuring that we, one, brought the right people on, and if we didn't, to get rid of them, which we did do this last year with one executive, we got rid of them.
Yeah, so I'm an executive coach, and I primarily work with kind of the growth and scale stages. And the reason is because whenever I work with larger enterprises, I often end up coaching them out of the role for exactly that reason. And so I create my own churn because it's the right thing for them to do, because that they were there from day one, they were the first engineer, one of the co-founders, and the company just either outgrew them or it just wasn't where they were having fun anymore. And I think that's just an honest conversation that needs to be had, rather than blaming the person or throwing shade on them for not keeping up with those demands. It's like, hey, you know what? You're a startup person, right? Or you really like it when the teams are super small. Maybe there's a role for you or a division or some sort of new R&D or innovation type place you can go to. But sometimes it's just too big and too corporate, and you need to go find a new place to play. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so now I want to shift gears a bit. So these are obviously the sort of functional stories of the companies growing. Now, my favorite topic is around leadership. So I want to understand how you as leaders have had to reinvent yourselves and transform as you've gone through these stages. So the first kind of inflection point is when you sort of scale out from that initial founding team and maybe starting to have to hire your first managers, right? And you maybe had to start leading from a bit of a distance. So what were some of the challenges, if you can remember, that you had in that transition, and how'd you deal with them?
I would say the first big question you have to hit is autonomy versus control, and deciding how much you want to let someone own that maybe you owned before, or a region will own decision making versus centralized. I feel like I went through 3 or 4 inflection points along a 5-year journey where the entire org structure we sort of outgrew this shell, and we had to pick a new shell to grow into that made more sense at the time. And with every one of those transitions, you as a leader have to decide what you're going to keep and what you're going to give away, and how you're going to keep balance consistency with being nimble and being able to move quickly. So it's an ongoing challenge. But I think for me, that's the thing I still struggle with, is figuring out when it's time and how much control to give up and how much ownership to give away.
Any sort of principles or decisions that you've made related to that?
I think with time, you just kind of get maybe a little more humble, and you recognize, like you said, that you're going to hire people. Hopefully they're better than you at everything that you're hiring for. And I think when you can get over that and you're actually looking for someone who's going to be way better than you at the thing you used to do, that's kind of a tipping point moment. Yeah.
I think like the two anecdotes I'll share is like in the early days, like the decision that I'm most proud of is that when we hit like we're like 2 million run rate business, we're 18 people. I was still doing all of HR and coordinating every like email and every freaking calendar invite. It was like driving me freaking nuts. I was like, this is way not a good use of my time. So I had to sit down my two co-founders. I'm going to hire a head of people. And they're like, why not an HR person? I'm like, head of people. I was like, we're people here. We have like intentional values and culture we're trying to build. It's more than just HR. Also, HR is boring, so why not call it head of people? So that was Misty. She's still with us over 4 years in. The other role was a chief of staff. And I had to like really explain to my co-founders what a chief of staff was. So why don't you just get an EA? Because the salary for chief of staff is almost double, sometimes triple that of an EA. And I was like, I'm not looking for an EA to just coordinate. I need somebody who is a thought partner, that if I'm getting emails from one of our investors, I'm getting emails from a high-ranking person in the startup community, or if it's a potential new hire, like I want their full time and attention on it as if I was on it. And that's something that's hard to find. So you have a deep level of trust in bringing on a chief of staff in the organization. I see founders make this mistake too long, is they wait too long to bring this person in because they can't give up the control. And I was ready to give it up right then and there. Wish I had done it even earlier. But my chief of staff today, Ada, who Neil knows, and if I don't know any other shareholders in here, but like she's like, if you want on my calendar, like she's the gatekeeper. She's in my inbox. She knows literally how I think, who I want to talk to, the moods I'm in, probably up there with my wife. But like her level of excellence, it's not just applicable to me as a chief of staff now. She's the glue to our executive team today at our stage. But that started in early, I guess, late 2020 when we were, again, less than 20 headcount. And it paid off because that was probably the most, at the time, was a woman named Monica, who's a San Diego native. And it just wonderful hire that we had made for the company. So I'm really grateful for the two of them. At the later stage, to answer this piece of it though, like one of the things that you have to remind yourself of, if you're CEO, you're the founder, the controlling shareholders, like you have to make decisions. Like decisions move the business forward. And you get this place where it feels somewhat like a democracy. You want everybody to be on your side and vote in the direction that you think is best for the business. And like sometimes people can't make a fucking decision. And like you have to make the decision. Like that's your job. And like we had this point, I'm sorry, I'm venting now. Like we had this point where I'm like, I'm tallying up all the salaries of our leadership team at the time. We're paying people like $1.5 million total. And decisions are still falling back to my co-founder and I. I'm like, I'm not paying these people this kind of money to not make decisions. So like that was a big factor. Like as you're building your company, you want people that you can hire to trust to make the right decision. Even if they made the wrong decision, if they made the decision and you supported them, it's still the right move sometimes, because that's the best part about leadership, is that you get people that you can trust enough to make decisions. So I'll get off my TED Talk. I don't know what's going on.
I mean, we're here talking about growing pains. There need to be some F-bombs to go with it, right?
It's after 5:00.
Awesome. So other than that, again, so it sounds like, hiring great people, sort of skating where the puck is going, and, hiring for growth, right? Anticipating the needs of the business. Obviously, delegation and letting go of some control. It's brought up a couple times around culture. So this is another big inflection point. And once you kind of get past maybe it's the 2 pizza stage, maybe it's the what is it, I forget the limit, right? The 150 person tribal limit, where culture really starts to break apart and diverge and you can't really control it anymore. How do you influence and foster a good culture in your company once it gets to scale?
Yeah, well, I can tell you, we've been through some bad experiences where we hired really strong people, had different culture mindsets. I would say they like to lead by stick versus carrot, and it just was something that really broke our company apart. It's one of the reasons why I left the company we took public back back in 2016. And that's one of the missions I went on to create this other company was we wanted to make sure we set the foundation up front and made sure the leaders that we were bringing in were not only smarter and more experienced at the next level, but also had the same culture, right? So what we're putting in as a foundation, we're hoping that can continue to spread out through each one of our leadership teams. And so each one of our leadership teams are built to say, look, when we get to that scaling point, we need to bring somebody else in that has that next level, but also has that culture mindset that we think we want this company to be. Where we did in the past, we didn't. We were just bringing in the best and smartest people we thought they were, but not taking in culture into consideration. And they just brought in cancerous, and that really kind of tore the company apart.
You can go first.
Yeah, I think hiring and firing is where it starts. In order to have a consistent culture, you have to know what you're looking for, especially when you have people hiring in multiple places. So it needs to be clear, not just the skill and the intelligence, like you said, but really what are the attributes that you want in your team. And it needs to be the same everywhere. And when you recognize that you have a cancer, you've got to cut it out quick. That can kill you so quickly. And sometimes it's a high performer that is toxic that needs to go. So you have to be willing to make those decisions. And I think it's also really important to explain why you made that decision, so everyone recognizes what culture, not only what it is, but what it isn't, and that you're willing to make hard decisions, fast decisions when needed.
Yeah, I think in the early days, we didn't have a bad culture fit hire until we were like 2.5-3 million run rate, 25 head count, and we had a woman who came out of financial services. She was super talented, extreme high performer. I found her, hired her. First 6 months was like off the charts impressive. And then shit just started to break. And it was mostly relationships. And this is like the reminder as you're leading a company, it's like you can't sacrifice that one high performer at the risk of losing 3 or 4 good people, which was the situation that we were going through. And I vividly remember having this conversation with my co-founders, like if we don't get rid of her, we will lose the next 3 or 4 people within weeks, if not days. And it was a decision that we made. And I'm happy that we did it because I vividly remember this call with this woman who was on our team. And it was almost amicable when we had the call. We were like, yes, we were firing her, but she was like, I was already on my way out in a couple months anyways. We're like, shit, we should have done it months ago. So it worked out. It was like a weird thing. It worked out. And that's the thing is like you get so caught up in the relationships or the what if all the way up until the moment of you departing, you're firing them. And it feels so much better on the other side every time, like infinitely better. And it's probably better for them too. And generally, I could be wrong. We've hired probably 200 people. We're about 100 today. I've probably fired 50, 60, and 40 have left on their own. And there's probably not maybe one person that I don't have a relationship with anymore just because it's a different dynamic. But generally speaking, it's better for that person to move on or to get pushed out the door, shown the door. It's hard to do though every time.
Any like leadership principles that you live by, or anything that you use as kind of a mantra, either in hiring or leading your teams?
No venture, no gain. It's just like I try to take every opportunity I see and get and with the team and try to go after it. And so fail fast and move on. And that's kind of been our MO.
I still onboard every hire. It's a weird thing that I don't want to let go of. And I was inspired at one of our investor conferences we went to, where the founders of Workday came up and spoke on stage like this, and it was a room full of entrepreneurs like this. And the two co-founders, it was one of the co-founders, but he said the two co-founders interviewed the first 500 people at Workday, and there's today public company, massive market cap, Fortune 100 best company to work for decade plus. And that really left a mark on me. So while it wasn't maybe realistic for us to interview every single person, we've had thousands of interviews over the last 7 years. But for me personally as a CEO to onboard every single new hire, to welcome them into the business, it's a reminder for me to get excited again, but also to get them excited that on their first day, which is my, couple thousandth day, whatever 7 years is on the math there, I am reminded as why somebody wanted to join us on our mission, and it gets me fired up and hopefully gets them fired up. So that's kind of a principle, I guess, that I still do that's unique.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a mantra, but it's sort of like I feel like culture is the only thing that keeps a company together when you're spread really far apart distance-wise. And I've talked to so many people about this topic, and it really is the glue. And so it comes back to like who you select, what you reinforce day to day, what you hold up is, this is someone who gets the gold star. Why is that? Decisions on the other side as well. But yeah, without that, there's no way you're going to scale and cover the globe, which I think most SaaS or tech companies want to do, and hold the wheels on.
All right. So as we kind of round out the last few minutes here, let's look to the future. Are there any sort of trends or shifts that you're seeing in the SaaS space, either from a technological perspective or from a fundraising perspective, that entrepreneurs in the audience should be well aware of? And don't just say AI. That's a cop-out.
Yeah, I think with so much changing, it's so tempting to go look at what the latest thing is that you could play with and build into your product and go, run with that. But everybody else is running at that too right now. So I think when I think about differentiation and moats, it's so important to think about the things that never change, and building a moat around that instead of building all your moat around the shiny new thing that you could build to.
I guess for me, we bootstrapped our company for 4 years, or the other one was 15 years before I got a private equity firm in. This last one, I learned my lesson. Let's get to the money faster to help it scale. I think being old school back in the old days, things moved a lot slower. So, you didn't have to invest that much up front. Now, I think with SaaS, it's just the technology is so fast and so rapid, and it's so easy for other people to create Me Too products. Mm-hmm. So when you think you have it and you got product fit and you got customers accepting it, I recommend going out and trying to find some funding or hooking up with a private equity fund that could help you strategically connect to the right people to help you scale faster. That'd be something I've seen different from back in the days to now.
Yeah, I will not say AI anything. So I'll say brand. Like we set out 7 years ago to build the consumer leading brand for estate planning, an industry that had never had a brand before in this space. And today we have data that actually backs up that we are the leading estate planning brand. We've helped hundreds of thousands of families. We have over 1 million estate planning documents we've created. And like we'll do 50 million in revenue this year as a company, which is great. But like over the next 3 to 5 years, we want to be a public company doing hundreds of millions of revenue, helping millions of families. And one of the ways that we are getting there is building a brand. We have 7, I don't know if anyone's seen our Trust Milk commercials before, but we have 7 commercials in rotation today. We will probably do a Super Bowl spot next year. So if you don't see one yet, you'll definitely see one then. But like some of the bets that we're taking are brand oriented. I'm actually heading up to LA tomorrow with 2 professional sports teams and a professional sports league to explore what branding opportunities that we have with them as the official estate planning partner of those teams or of that league. And it comes with a big price tag, but if we can measure it and we can report on it, we can continue to invest in it. And that's where, like, I don't know if anyone knows this, but like the entry point price for the NFL to be a brand partner is $40 million on a 5-year deal minimum. That's like you could come to our building. Like you look at USAA and Aflac, they're spending hundreds of millions with the NFL every year, but like everybody started these companies. And like at some point, hopefully everybody will have heard of Trust-A-Mo, and we become the default brand. Like you don't even have to think about where do you go to create an estate plan. You think Trust-A-Mo first, and only if you have a preference to go somewhere else, you go to the attorney down the street or LegalZoom. So brand, that's my answer.
Yeah. Nice.
Okay, so as we kind of round this out, I always like to say sort of what's one piece of advice you wish you had learned early on. But again, for folks in the audience that are on your journey, a few steps behind, any rocks that you want to point out that they shouldn't trip over?
Oh, man.
I just have an easy one. Your company is not your identity. This is my 3rd startup, 2nd venture-backed business. Like, I take this polo off every night, or like 5:30 usually every day. I'm dad. I got 2 little kids. I've got a dog. I got a wife. Like I have a life that is not my work, and like I just want to be able to help people in what I do entrepreneurially. And if I can do that through Trust-A-Mo, great. If it's not this business, it's the next one, great. But like I think that you get so tied into your identity as to what you're building, it becomes who you are, and that's not a good way to live, and it's not a good way to run your company. I think it's really important to be able to separate the two, and it's not this work-life balance bullshit that doesn't exist if you're an entrepreneur. But like if you can prioritize yourself, you prioritize your relationships, your health, like it unlocks unbelievable things when it comes to business. And I think that was a big step function, learning that from my last company to this one, was your company is not your identity.
No, I thought that was a good one.
I will say one thing. So, I'm an executive coach. Again, I focus on technology. I focus on software and product. And what it's evolved into is actually sleep, diet, and exercise. It is really the foundation of your business. So how can you be a good leader? How can you sell people on your dream? How can you put in the hard hours if you're not sleeping, if you're angry all the time, if you're drinking or abusing substances? And so a lot of my continuing education as a coach has been really around the human side of things, and then we can focus on building a good business. So it's definitely a great words of wisdom. I think we got the sign 1 minute left. Any last thoughts? No? All right.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, both of you, for being on the panel, and we appreciate everybody's time. Enjoy the rest of the conference.